KnockBack, the retro and nostalgia podcast, is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn how to support our show, go to patreon.com/laststandmedia. Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to KnockBack. My name is Colin Moriarty. I'm joined as always by my brother Dagan Kronos Moriarty. Dagan, welcome to the show. How are you today, my friend?
It's like the ugliest character in a game full of ugly characters. I'm like, really? It's appropriate, I guess. I was hoping you would go with like Dagan, God amongst the men.
God, yeah, if it was nice, I would have done that.
That would have been a little more pleasant for me, but I appreciate you all the same.
It's good to see you. How are you,
friend? You rocking the Jets shirt?
Yeah, it's just the draft just happened. We drafted our new quarterback, Zach Wilson, second overall.
I know how
a
much
young man out of BYU.
But
you gotta get into it.
It's almost May, and there was a day this week. I wasn't going to go there, but let me briefly regale you with my aggravation. I'm not a big football guy. Some of you guys out there know that.
Which annoys me a little bit, but yeah, go on.
I know. It's a bone of contention for you too. I understand, but you know, it's spring. It's getting warm outside. It's like late April during the week. Walking home from the bus stop, and it's all dads at my bus stop except for one person, which is interesting. And they start going on about, I guess it was that day or that morning was, their draft teams, their fantasy teams were starting their draft, right? So they're starting to talk about football. And I'm thinking in my head, like, can I get a break? It's April. Can I get a break from fucking football talk? Now, also, I can't be a part of these conversations, so I feel a little left out. I have no idea what's happening. No idea about fantasy football. I know you and Uncle Mike.
Well, it's not. To be clear, it's the draft, like the draft of the real teams.
Oh, it's
in
the
league.
All right, so this has nothing to do with their fantasy teams.
Well, some people could do like fantasy, what's called mock drafting, which is a whole other way to like gamble.
Oh,
but this is a substantial moment because all of the teams are getting their new players.
You know what? Maybe they were just talking about. I mean, it's Eagles country, right? Everybody's so adamant about their football out here. But yeah, I was just getting so aggravated. I was like, it's the baseball conversation start? It never starts.
No, the baseball conversation will never start until, because I think the NFL is like really strategic about, they have like a moment. They've really the NFL is huge. It's way bigger than the other leagues. Sure. And way more lucrative, gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And they just do a really nice job. Like they just expanded the season to 17 games starting this year.
Oh,
from
I
16.
didn't know that.
The first time that it's been expanded in like 35 years or something like that. And they do a really nice job of like April.
Yeah.
You've been away for a little while. Right. Draft. So everyone starts paying attention for like a little while. Then it's like, oh, give you a little bit more time. Oh, the schedule, and then they like do the schedule release so everyone sees who's playing who. And then they like let it marinate and it's like mini camp and then training camp. And
so
then
it's relevant
preseason. It's
360.
Always. That's why, I listen to football podcasts. I dip in and out of them throughout the year, like from preseason through the end of the Super Bowl. I listen pretty much every day.
Yeah.
And then the rest of the year, I dip in and out during events. But these shows are huge, and there's like always something to talk about. I'm actually kind of jealous because they do like daily shows and they have more to talk about than sometimes we do on a PlayStation show every week. So
that's interesting. I mean, the other sports could probably take a cue from. I mean, the other sports aren't as big, so it would be difficult for them. But yeah, man.
Baseball's always been great for like talk radio kind of style because it's an ongoing saga. There's a game 6 of 7 or 7 of 8 days. You're playing a team 3 times in a row. It's very relaxed. It takes 4 hours and there's tons of stuff to parse through. So I've always loved baseball announcing because I think it's like the hardest to do because you got so much to fill.
There's a lot there. Yeah. But football is interesting, dude, because I never thought of this before. I'm sure you've thought of this multiple times, but every game is an event. There's only 17 games. Every game is a war. You know what I mean? Right. Every game has so much meaning. So it is
massive consequence. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I say that often, that not only that, but then like the way, because everyone plays so few games, the way that the tiebreakers break down, like, because like everyone, I love the NFL because the schedules are all predictable.
Yeah.
So like, this might be boring to people out there, but there are 8 divisions in the NFL separated into 2 conferences, the AFC and the NFC. And there are 4 teams in each division. So 8 sets of 4 separated into 2 sets of 4. And each of those 4 teams in each division play each other twice every year. So the Jets always play the Patriots twice. They always play the Bills twice. They always play the Dolphins twice.
Right.
And then the schedule works out that wherever you place in those 4, The next year, you play all of the teams in that same place. So if you were the last place team, you play all of the last place teams in your division.
Okay.
And then the next rule is that then your division plays an entire another division in your conference.
Right.
So that goes like in a rotisserie, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. The only and then you go into the next conference. So like the Jets only play the Cowboys once every 4 years. The Jets only play the Packers once every 4 years.
Events.
So the only games that are even not predictable year to year are where you place. And that's how like hugely consequential like the swing, because everyone has the same schedule in your division, except for like the losers play the losers, the winners play the winners to try to give some parity. So
they got it all worked out. Can I be honest with you?
Yeah.
I almost just fell asleep 5 times.
I'm sorry. I hope that made sense.
It did make sense. I should stop. I should stop resisting and just get on board. They got it all figured out. The NFL's got it all figured out. It is. I do like the sport. I just don't have time to watch it. I feel like.
Well, here's my take on this for you.
Yeah.
Maybe people out there would disagree. I fell off of baseball the older I got because it's too much. And until they do something about it, and until they do something about the salary cap situation, which is outrageous, they have lost me. I like the NFL because there are so few games.
Right.
That you can, it's like 256 games or something, like you can count them, like how many, like literally how many games a year there are. It's not like some absurd number.
Total, right, sure. Yeah.
And I think it's such a thinking man's game. It's chess. I don't think people really see it. It's awesome. Like it's super cool. Coordinators in booths and on the sidelines just radioing in plays that like, and they're just spreading their players around and moving them around based on reactive things. It's a beautiful sport. I really encourage everyone to get into it, but
yeah, man,
it's not for everyone.
Nah. I'm up. I'm awake. I'm fine.
Yeah, I digress.
No, I'm fine, dude.
Dick, I have two things to show you this week.
What do you got for me?
So I was gonna say Grandpa. Grandpa's been dead for 25 years. Dad came. Of course, shout out to Grandpa. Dad came down to the Virginia. I don't know why I just call it the Virginia. It's like 1650. We're going to the Virginia colony. So Dad came down and he was really eager to get rid of all of the things that I left in his house for years. I mean, he's been excited about this for a long time. So he came down with his Dodge massive post-apocalyptic road truck. And he had it packed to the brim with like all my things. And it's just books and like my old Star Wars toys, which I think I'm going to go through on Twitch and like clean them and go through them and remember them.
Oh, that would be fun.
I was looking at like my stormtroopers. They're all like dusty, like go through and kind of like wipe them down and remember, this is where I got this. And I remember these stories. So I think people would really enjoy that. So anyway, there was a box of a couple of accoutrements and 2 things stuck out to me that come up on the show.
Okay.
Have come up on the show multiple times. So I thought I would show you them.
Oh my God, you have the Dracula tape.
No, I wouldn't do that without you. So hold on a second.
Okay.
I'm just going to go off. Am I off camera?
You are indeed.
Camera. All right, hold on a sec.
Big reveal coming up here. I'm excited. I'm also a little nervous that this could be embarrassing for me. Oh, there it is. Where did Colin go? All I see is Magnet Man, a perfect rendition of Magnet Man. He doesn't have a towel on his shoulders, but otherwise.
No, Allie took some pictures of me with a towel when she was at my house when I found this. But for people that don't know, this is I used to, Colin's 6 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, 1990, 1991, somewhere in there. I was obsessed with Mega Man. Mega Man 3 had just come out. We got it for Christmas in 1990. And I loved that robot. And I just had this like Fisher Price magnet. So I would rubber band it to my head so I look like Magnet Man.
Many memories of that.
Now the
fidelity of our Riverside video is really low right now. I can't see how it's on your head. Oh, I see.
It's a rubber band. Yeah. So we use a program called Riverside, and it's high quality, and it records it in high quality. But sometimes we don't see each other in high quality. So that's the first thing, and then I'll bring in the other thing.
Dude, that's amazing. I'm only realizing now that the eyes on that Fisher Price magnet only make it more Mega Man for some reason.
Yeah,
right?
No, totally. Because it looks like one of the lesser robots in a stage or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. And then I have the second thing. You ready?
Dude, that's huge. You got no.
It's missing the barrel.
I see
which
that.
I have to find. It's probably in one of the boxes.
Okay, yeah.
And it's coming apart a little bit, so you can glue it together. But this is a Laramie, probably from 1984, something like that.
Yeah.
A Laramie water gun Uzi. So real looking that
Kids.
You would get fucking... You couldn't buy this in the store less than 35 years. This would probably been illegal.
This is what a toy looked like in the mid 1980s. For those of you younger people, cats who might not.
Please
note.
note.
The clip.
You put the water in the clip.
Look at and then snap it in.
Yeah, and snap it in.
You know why we loved it? Snake Eyes had an Uzi.
Oh yeah, dude.
You know, that was the huge thing. It was like Snake. Before we even knew that was called an Uzi, we knew that was Snake Eyes' gun. Very important. Very important, you guys. So look at this. These are 2 pieces of Moriarty history. Look at that striker pose. I like it. I mean, the magnet in particular is just like that's Moriarty family lore that you guys are seeing for maybe the first time. A lot of you guys, right? We never had that on camera before.
I don't think so. I don't think it's ever been shown. Certainly never been worn.
Look, I mean, that's a treat. That's a treat.
So I thought you'd like that.
I love it. That's huge.
Yeah, I thought that was funny because that you're right. Like the magnet is a piece of lore. It's a story that like people love to tell for some reason. You know,
that was it.
And this is the one.
Dude, can you? I mean, it looks big on your head now. Can you imagine being a little 6-year-old Colin, 4-year-old?
My head was always this big,
and you have that on your head. It's huge.
My head was always this large. But yeah, we brought up this Uzi. I mean, this is fucking awesome,
dude. That's cool.
Dude, I would, if I had kids and they were like, I want to play with that. I'd be like, I know you do. You know, play with it in the house.
Luckily, we didn't get murdered in Medford, Long Island, running around the yards with that thing. Imagine that thing ended up in East New York. Like if we went to the firehouse with Dad, that's Brooklyn for those cats who are out there who don't know. A bad part of Brooklyn.
Yeah,
still
horrible.
Not a gentrified
ungentrifiable part of Brooklyn. Yeah.
I don't know. Don't defy them. They might have something up their sleeve. They've done every other neighborhood.
It's true.
But yeah. Oh man, that's awesome. That's a nice trip down memory lane, Kyle. Very.
Yeah, cool. I'm sorry for the audio listeners, but come watch the YouTube video just for that. You can see the magnet that has come up, and of course we've brought up the Uzi many times, and there you go, it's real. I hope it's in one of the boxes. I'm sure it is the barrel, because the barrel is black.
Yeah.
So it's not like there is no indication that this thing is fake.
Nothing.
None. You're like a little kid in Medford, 1983. Walking down the street, walking down Neighbor Avenue with a fucking water gun Uzi.
Oh my god!
You could have been shooting people up. You'd be dead if you did that today. You'd be done. If I brought this down I live in the South. If I brought this down my neighborhood and like the kids were outside playing, some parent would light me up.
Oh my god! Yeah. Can you imagine? It reminds me too. Like I always wanted. We had Rambo and Red Dawn and all those 80s action movies. I always wanted a water balloon launching RPG, shoulder-mounted RPG. Did they ever come out with that?
I don't know. That's super cool because the only thing I remember to that is they had the water balloons that were grenades, which were cool.
That was cool.
But I never knew of any. You're right, because like, there needs to be a more satisfying way to integrate water balloons into water gun fights, because it's either one or the other. I feel like because you want to throw a grenade, you want it to do some damage, but sometimes like bounces off the person because you're kind of like running because you're shooting them too. You know, you're not getting like enough velocity. Because that was the worst, right? Like throwing a water balloon and then the enemy gets it because like it didn't explode, and it's break. Like, oh no, like it's like -1. You lost one of your pieces of ordnance, you know. And it fell into enemy hands.
That's so good, dude. Or aliens, right? Like something that fires water, like a super soaker, but also you have the grenade, the pump action water balloon grenade. That would be cool. Like a 2-in-1. They have to have that.
I'm sure they do. And there are dads or moms that would be out there that would make like, you know, make something like that. Because Derek, our brother-in-law, they just had this, what is it, the Pinewood Derby?
Yeah. I love
Boy Scouts, and so he was there, and he was saying like the kid that won, like that, like carved all the other kids up. Like his dad basically just built it, and some parent was asking him like, oh, what did you do to your car and stuff? And he's like, oh, I don't know, my dad built it.
I laugh, but that's what Dad did with me. I didn't do shit. He would go in the basement. He would go down in the lab for like 2 hours and emerge with a car, and I'd be like, shit, that's awesome. And I would always place really well, but I never knew. he would dig it in, put the weights in it and stuff like that, so it would go, kind of ground it, make it bottom heavy so it would go faster. He knew all the physics and mechanics, Dad. But I never got involved.
That's Dad painting. Don't you understand that that's Dad painting Warhammer figures? That it just there just wasn't a way to define it.
That's a very
at that time
point. That's a great point.
It was just Dad being a hobbyist.
Yes,
but
doing what he was good at, but not even being able to really necessarily articulate that. Just doing it.
You know what I was thinking about with this day?
Tell me.
We're getting way off the track here, so pardon the pun for what I'm about to say, but I've been thinking about trains, like in train sets, and I've always felt like that was always kind of maybe a segue for all adults in the days of yore. Like you can see like a random sitcom or a random drama, a period drama from post-war, and they go into the basement, and like the dad might have like a train set or something in his workbench or whatever.
Yeah.
That was kind of the beginning of that as well. And then model cars, because like I saw Uncle John yesterday for the first time in several years at least. And he, likes to tinker around both with real cars and toys and stuff like that. So
definitely
dudes were getting into it in manly ways. And then they started painting Warhammer.
That is a great point. Not only model trains, but I would say slot cars, which is very of the 70s, I would say 60s and 70s, and trading cards, baseball cards and stuff. So there always was something before it became overtly nerdy, I guess.
Yeah, baseball cards. That's a good point too. And hey, man, as far as I know, the baseball card and like just sports card thing is like booming right now, apparently. And
is it really?
I have like an asinine amount of hockey cards. I'm sure they are the least valuable of the four major sports, but they might be worth something. I mean, I have probably 10,000. I mean, maybe more than that. They're just like in huge bins.
Maybe they're the most valuable, since it might be the least. The least popular. Maybe it was always least popular underneath football and baseball. And what would be the other big thing? Basketball, I guess.
Basketball, yeah. Yeah. Well, all right.
You digress.
That was fun. I think I digressed.
You digest.
I digressed a long time ago, didn't I? All right, Dagan. Well, I'm glad everything's well with you, and hope everything is well out there with the audience. Of course, I should say KnockBack is our retro and nostalgia podcast. We do it each and every week. You can support it on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. We are the biggest nerd culture Patreon over there, and with our podcast and our YouTube videos and all that, we appreciate it. So thank you so much. We are really close to hitting a goal. We went back down because of attrition at the beginning of the month, but we'll go back up.
Right.
If we reach 10,500 subscribers, we will start doing like a limited Let's Play series, which I envision is doing with Dagan. So we will see if we get there, and then we'll figure out what that might look like. I think we can have a lot of fun.
The fun we'll be having with that.
Oh my God,
that's going to be a lot of laughs.
People loved some of the Let's Plays we did, like the one-offs. We did a Let's Play for Jackal, I think back in 2018, that people thought was like hysterical, and a few others. So, and I actually still have a couple on my computer I never even published because we just stopped publishing them. So maybe we'll put those out at some point.
That would be cool. Belly
CLS
laughs
classic
to be had for sure.
Definitely.
Always.
All right, Dave. But the topic today is God of War on PlayStation 2, 2005. And this is a fan vote topic, kind of.
Okay.
So on Patreon, one of the perks you can get there is to submit your ideas for topics and vote on other people's topics. And we do a monthly election. So about one in every 4 episodes you hear is a fan voted topic. And this is one of them. But we set this is the show wherein I set the new rules, because they voted for God of War 2018, which is the God of War reboot. And I was like, God of War 2018 is a phenomenal game, and I would love to talk about it. It's, I think no one would say it's a worse game than this. This is a good game, but God of War 2018 is considered one of PlayStation's like crown jewels, but it's too new. And at that point I was like, no, let's do the original God of War. So we're doing the 2005 PlayStation 2 David Jaffe directed God of War. And this is a monumentally important game. I beat it. Well, I played it back on PS2, but I beat it for the first time on PS3, and I sat down with it again on Vita and made it most of the way through. It's funny, actually. I was telling Dagan, I jammed my finger dicking around the house, and the Vita was just I'm playing on Vita, and the Vita was just killing my hand. After a while, I just couldn't do it anymore. So I think I got to I was almost to Hades, I think. So
you got far. Yeah, you were far.
Yeah, it's almost the end of the game, but I remember it. And I looked some things up, but nonetheless. And the game was produced by Shannon Studstill, who later went on to lead Sony Santa Monica. So I'm really curious, Dig. This is a game that for PlayStation fans, and of course I come from that ecosystem, this is a massively important landmark game. And it, in some way, is the first PlayStation-made mascot when you think about the greater consciousness of gamers. You had games like Gran Turismo coming from the first party. You obviously had games like Ratchet from Insomniac, but they weren't owned by at that time. Crash Bandicoot was coming out of Naughty Dog, but they weren't owned at that time. You had Jak and Daxter kind of filling in the holes there. But I feel like God of War was the first, along with Grand Theft Auto, probably and Shadow of the Colossus, Eco, amongst the most important games on PS2. And I have long been a critic of this game, and people know that. I've long been really, really critical of it.
Oh, wow.
Pretty hard on it. And I tried to go into it with an open mind. Here's what I always said. I think the game is fun to play, and you can see how important it is in all it does, and also what it takes homage from. But I find Kratos such an uninteresting and frankly annoying character that it ruined it for me. And that was why I beat God of War. I beat God of War 2. I didn't even beat God of War 3 or Ascension or the PSP games. And then I jumped. So I was out, and then I jumped back into the reboot, which is just a totally different Kratos, basically. So, well, maybe. So, I'm really curious. What do you think of this game? What do you think of 2005's God of War?
Well, there's so much to say. I love some of the stuff you already mentioned. I never even thought of Kratos as like a iconic frontman, but he really is a mascot.
He is, along with Drake maybe, and now Ratchet. But like he's definitely amongst, and maybe Aloy from Horizon. So maybe in like that group of 5, he would definitely be one of them. Yeah.
Oh man.
I would think Ratchet would make the most sense in Smash Brothers, just on a character by character basis.
Absolutely.
But I think actually Kratos is the one who should, if they ever sent a character over, should be in Smash Brothers.
Because that would be funny for Smash. You're absolutely right.
Because it would be funny. It would be like it's like having Richter in there or something. It's
right.
ridiculous.
Exactly. Yeah. From anyway. Like a similar type of world. Right. Yeah, man. I mean, there's just so much to unpack with this, because it was really a treat for us to go back. First of all, to extend back so far. Now, we've played a lot of games on KnockBack, and quite frankly, playing a newer game, like let's say Colin and I just decided to do The Last of Us Part 2, it would do really well for our show. But we've decided to stave off from that and go back and truly make the topics a throwback topic. And I think this is a great one. It's a great fit for that. We've done, and this is partially a shameless plug for some of the other episodes we've done some really iconic, more contemporary games. BioShock Infinite, The Last of Us, Far Cry 3, Horizon Zero Dawn now, Resident Evil 2 Remake, I think was our first one, Dead Space, Mass Effect. I mean, we've done so many. We've done the first.
Wow, we really have. We're starting to cut through. We're starting to really get you going. It's
I know, and this is really nice. This is nice to go back a little further than we normally do. And also just add to my PlayStation vocabulary now, something that's not only an iconic game, but will go on to be an iconic franchise, and now be able to have this conversation and experience it for myself and have the conversation, see what all the fuss is about. I think it's not inappropriate to say it's considered one of the best PlayStation 2 games, certainly. A lot of people
definitely.
love it.
I think it's considered one of the, I would go as far as to say it might be considered one of the best action games of all time, like 3D action games ever.
And I could see that. And it was interesting on a lot of levels, because, when we go back and we do a throwback video game topic, you go back to an 8-bit game or a 16-bit game, it has that old-timey charm to it, You go to a newer game like the PS3 and PS4 games that we've been playing, and they're more contemporary. It's more of a contemporary, modern conversation. PlayStation 2, and I would argue probably PlayStation 1, is a different realm, because the conversation could definitely largely be how well did this game age. We know it goes on. God of War goes on to be a big franchise, but this first iteration, how is this conversation going to go now? Between 15 and 20 years later. And I have to say, I really, really enjoyed it for what it is. I think a large part of it is what you said about Kratos is interesting, and I hope we would get to this at some point in our talk. But I would say even further than what you said, he's kind of an unlikable character. Certainly an anti-hero, obviously, right? But I was a little bit polarized with playing as Kratos, because he really is an unlikable dude. As the story goes on, you realize that's a big part of his character, that he's sort of an irredeemable bastard. You know what I mean? And even for going through the motions and getting his revenge on Ares and working in service to Athena and all that kind of stuff, he really doesn't ever get sort of cleansed of his sins, which is really interesting. And also for those guys who are living under a rock like me and girls that haven't played the game yet, this is definitely one where I would say go play it before you watch the conversation, because the story, there are spoilers in the story. The story is actually deeper than you think it is in the beginning, which is, it seems very on its surface like, okay, this is an unapologetic video game. Very button mashy combat. A lot of video game tropes, like the rooms full of like giant buzzsaw blades and crushing rocks that you have to run through and stuff. It's like, it seems very unapologetically video gamey, but there is a lot of substance there when you get in, and there's more and more reveal in the story about Kratos' character, the enemies you encounter, the world that you encounter, and sort of some major players in the story operating, sort of incognito and stuff. So it gets actually pretty interesting. I had a great time with it. Graphically, it was a little weird in the beginning. I was like, you see that entry, that title screen, you're like, oh God, here we go. It feels very of that era. That quickly got stripped away. I forgot all about it because I just had a good time. And you know what the other thing is, Kyle? I think I was fortunate too, because the game took me a little longer than it probably should have, but I think I ended up falling somewhere in between 12 and 13 hours. It wasn't a long time commitment, but it also, for some reason, just playing it when I did, fell into my schedule really well. I would work all day, kids go to bed at night. I was able to pop it in, play it for anywhere, of a night, like between an hour and a half and 3 hours. Just really enjoy it for a couple of weeks. And it fit so well into my schedule. And just the difficulty and the gameplay itself. It's, I would say it struck the right balance for me, for this relatively newbie gamer, as far as the action, the puzzle elements, just hard enough to be compelling, but not hard enough to put you off or, make a long-standing effort out of it. It really was just kind of a pleasure from start to finish. There was a couple of parts that got a little bit stressful, but for the most part, 90% of it was just a really enjoyable experience. I always feel when I do well at a game that it's encouraging for me to play other games that I missed. So it was a very positive experience in that regard. And I really just enjoyed it. I'm really curious to hear your history with the game and how you were sort of critical of it and all that kind of stuff. That's an interesting part of the conversation for me, because I could see, and we'll talk about the faults for me too. It's obviously not a perfect game, but all in all, it was a really cool experience, and I feel like I got another notch under my PlayStation belt, which is kind of always a cool feeling.
Definitely, it's a big one. It's a big one.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm curious to see what you have to say and see what our listeners have to say and have this conversation. I think it should be a fun talk for sure.
Certainly. And what's funny to me, when I was writing my notes, was I was trying to remain cognizant of remaining open-minded to the concept that Kratos isn't as bad as I think as a character, because like you said, he's an anti-hero, he's unlikable. There's certain things about him that are really interesting. I actually think it's pretty bold in some ways, the way Jaffe and the team decided to handle him. He manhandles women, like female characters. Like, he's incredibly violent. Now, some of them are sirens and shit like that, but
right.
There's an extra violence with the way he deals with women. There's obviously breasts galore in the game. And I actually warned Dagan about that, because I actually messaged Dagan multiple times, because I had brought up that there are boobs in the game, but then when I had started playing it again, I had forgotten that it's like almost immediately that you start seeing them.
It's pretty quick.
Because Dagan had said, he's been playing, I'm playing with Graydon or whatever, and I was like, and in my mind, I'm like, Dagan is definitely not playing the right one. I was afraid. I'm like, he's playing the new one. You were
worried about that.
Yeah, I was like warding him off. I'm like, I don't know why I was so worried about it, because that like reinstilled it, like, oh shit, like we're going to get together, and like I had played one game and he'd played this 50-hour.
It's going to happen. The inevitable is going to happen finally.
So I'm interested, like Kratos. So I was trying to kind of establish like a new way to think about Kratos.
Okay.
Within the confines of being a Spartan warrior, a bloodthirsty general, a captain or whatever he was, and kind of in betrayal of his wife and child, and in servitude to the gods for power. I will say that he doesn't get any better for me playing the game this time around. I think that my criticisms of Kratos have always been pretty accurate. He is a proxy for the action, which is phenomenal in the game. And I always thought that the gameplay in the game was great because it comes from the same school of Devil May Cry and Ninja Gaiden, like the Ninja Gaiden reboot from Team Ninja and all of the others, and Onimusha and stuff like that. And it all there's actually a massive amount of Capcom influence in this game. And I don't know that you hear that spoken very often. I think the puzzles are very Resident Evil-like. I think the inventory system is very Resident Evil-like in its limitations. It's much more limited than a Resident Evil inventory. Sure, but you know how like you pick up a key and it stops the whole game and shows you the key slowly rotating and says like a thing. It's very Resident Evil. But then I also noticed that I didn't like the way the game was talking to me, and that I realized that I was kind of filling that in for Kratos generally, which was a little bit unfair. I noticed just the very fact that the game uses all caps in its script is very loud. It's a very in-your-face game, and it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. Yet, it's of the era. It's a mid-aughts action game, and you can see all of its flaws in the PS2 era where people are trying to figure out how to make something real. And you started that kind of in Metal Gear Solid in the late PS1 era and others. But like, how do you make something real and believable? And it's funny because you have to make so many sacrifices to make a PlayStation 2 game look real, in quotes. And it's staggering in God of War, because I do remember playing it when I was in college when it came out. Someone had it, and I was just like, wow, like, does it get any more beautiful than this? This is insane. And it doesn't look very good. Like the jump from the beginning of the PS2 era to the end of the PS2 era is not huge compared to the jump from the beginning of the PS3 era. Like, look at Uncharted, Drake's Fortune to The Last of Us. These games run on the same hardware and they look radically different. I don't think that they really got there with God of War. So I think there are some sacrifices made there as well. But I'm wondering, what do you think about? Well, let's let the audience in, actually, and we'll let Tyler Brown ask this question. Tyler Brown wrote into us on Patreon, just like you can.
Yo, Tyler.
Says, hey, fellas, how do you feel about the gameplay in the original? Do either of you feel that it has aged well, or do you feel that it is outdated? Personally, I've always enjoyed the gameplay from the titles that came out prior to God of War 2018, as it felt more fast-paced and visceral. I realize that this is likely not a popular opinion, but I wanted to get the Moriarty brothers' take on the matter. Thanks for the awesome podcast. Have a good one. So, thank you, Tyler. This is a fundamental question, because the new God of War, which is some people's only introduction to God of War, is not like this God of War. That God of War is, I think it's more third person, literally almost over the shoulder-ish kind of.
Okay.
It's just much more modern.
Okay.
Now, this game is not modern.
No.
But and it's actually incredibly button mashy and doesn't take a whole lot of strategy, especially on normal. I actually didn't die at all in action. I died a few times falling off shit.
Platforming, yeah.
But I didn't die in action at all until I fought the Cerberuses, like the dogs.
Oh, those guys are a pain.
So that was when they turn into like bigger ones or whatever. That was like the first time I died, and that might be like 3/4 of the game through. So
I think so.
I don't think it's an especially difficult game from that point of view. But what did you make of the action? Just like, this is really in a few ways helped solidify the square and triangle light and hard motif that transcends everything from Bayonetta to, on and on and on and on and on. So what do you think?
I liked it. I mean, for me, again, I think just playing into the time period of my life with being busy at work and trying to do a justifiable job of doing our KnockBack episodes and playing something thoroughly, it really fit in nicely because I like the simplicity, not only of the combat, but of the inventory system, just leveling up a weapon and some magical spells, like very lean. You'd think of something that we played relatively recently that's the antithesis of that, like Horizon Zero Dawn, where you're managing your armor, you're managing your weapons, there's a million things to do. This, and just a couple of different colored orbs for, powering up your energy and your magic, and then the red orbs, which I thought of as like money to, buy power-ups for your few magical spells and items. I thought it was lean, but I thought it was fun enough to be compelling enough to just have a good time with it. When I first started the combat early in the game, I was like, oh, we're playing Final Fight. We're playing Streets of Rage. That's what it feels like, just kind of button mashy, trying to develop a rhythm with blocking. that was another, that I think the blocking adds another level to it, and dodging and rolling and all that kind of stuff. Just simple enough. Now, I'm not as experienced as Kyle with all these games, so I have less of a catalog to fall back on for comparison, but I really kind of enjoyed it. At first I felt myself wanting the controllers to be a little more complex. Like, oh, what if you threw some, besides the buttons, what if you threw some controller combos in there, Street Fighter-y type thing, which is, I go to that often because I love 2D fighters so much. But then I realized that would really be a whole nother system of play that you would have to develop timing-wise, that it really wouldn't work well with what this thing did. But I think there was enough there, especially with the Blades of Chaos, where, you know, you could develop a little bit. You know, you have your high-powered attack that takes longer to get out. You have your low-powered attack, and then you could chain the combos and do aerial things. So the double jump. So there was enough there to, I think, keep it interesting. And then you mix in the platforming, as you said, and the puzzle elements. I thought it was enough there to, you know, to maintain interest. And, you know, also remembering that this is an old game. You know, this is a 15-plus-year-old game. So look how far the action genre has come since then. And I love mixing the action and adventure elements too. The puzzle stuff mixed in, it seemed to develop a nice rhythm, a relatively nice rhythm between the puzzle stuff, figuring out some puzzle elements, whether that was moving things around or figuring out a labyrinth or defeating enough enemies to open a door, whatever it was. Mix in the combat, mix in, you know, just maintaining your spells and leveling up the things that you enjoyed the most. You only have 4 spells at your disposal, ultimately, and a couple of different weapons to choose from once you get to a certain point of the game. I thought it was enough for this type of game. I felt satisfied with it. I think satisfying might be the key word. Even with the combat, I felt like it was relatively satisfying, that you could do different things. Those sort of button events kick in once you weaken an enemy, and you could choose to do that or not. If you choose to do some of those things, you could get a little bit of life back in your life gauge, energy back in your life gauge. So I thought there was enough there to just keep things going, keep the interest, keep the curiosity kindled for compelling you to go on. And also, you know, a big part of this too was being more satisfied with the story as it went, because, you know, it gets a little more, as we said, it gets a little more substantive, it gets a little more in-depth. You get to learn a little bit more about Kratos. You get to learn a little bit more about his situation, what happens to his family, because in the beginning it's very vague. You know, he starts off, I think the whole game starts off with him jumping off the cliff, you know, trying to commit suicide. And then it's like, you know, you go back, it takes you back, you know, you have the low rent Dame Judi Dench narrator, who I liked, by the way. I'm not teasing, but I love the narration. I was actually, made me look forward to those cutscenes, actually. I really enjoyed that. And just learning more that the game, but you're right, there's something that reminded me of the whole package. And now you have to place it back in historical context to the mid-aughts, but it was very id-like in its unapologetic sort of heavy metal Doom-esque. Like, this is a, you know, Kratos is a badass and he's a killer, and, you know, this is a crazy world and we're going to beat the shit out of, you know, you see Kratos like taking out old women and children and innocent people and stuff like that. It's like, it seemed very like, you know, it reminded me of what the id dudes would, a philosophy they would embrace, you know, it's similar type of thing, which sounds corny, but it actually works in the package. And you can't forget to say the whole mythological Greek element, because who's not on board for that? You know, ancient Greek mythology is just, you know, you have the gods and the monsters and the titans and the heroes and the weapons and the magical settings and all this kind of stuff. It's really, I mean, it was just a pleasant surprise, I think. Going in, I didn't think it was going to be this enjoyable.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. I think, you know, I speak with a little bit of bias these days, but, you know, the director of the game, David Jaffe, is a personal friend of mine. Great affection for him. And he really is metal. I mean, that guy really is metal. He's the guy he designed Twisted Metal. He directed God of War. His last game, Drawn to Death, is awesome. Totally metal game. It wasn't picked up by many people. Do you know that game where it's?
I read about
it. It's like a cartoon. Like you're playing in a cart. It's like a kid's drawings in his notebook. But it was like a multiplayer game. So it was, if you don't get an audience, it's just doomed to fail. There was like no campaign or anything.
Is that the one he did when he opened up his own, when he went out on his own? Bartlett
Jones Detective Agency or whatever.
Best name for, I just read about this yesterday. best name for a studio. I know he's shut, he's closed his doors and now he does YouTube and Twitch streams or whatever.
Yeah, he streams and does stuff like that. I think he's probably making a game, but who knows? I'm sure he did pretty well for himself and can take his time to get back in. And he's a very outspoken person and a huge ally of mine. So I should say that
that's awesome.
That I do have a bias. Yeah, he's really a very interesting dude. And he'll be on the show, on my other show, Sacred Symbols, in the coming weeks, I think.
It's going to be huge.
But yeah, so knowing him, he walks the walk, right? Like this is the guy, when your pedigree is Twisted Metal and God of War and stuff like that, it's certainly, it feels real to me. And he's made other games that are like cuter or whatever. He worked on like Mickey Mania and shit like that back in the day. And like, yeah, so it's not like he's incapable of doing other things, but that's kind of his own brand. And so I was going to ask you about that, about the violence and the gore, specifically. It did feel try hard in a way, but it did feel mid-aughts-ish, like loud, boisterous Vin Diesel. I like Vin Diesel, but Vin Diesel movies and, huge explosions. And you could just see like where this comes from as this is percolating in 2003 and 2004 as they're making this game leading up to its March 2005 release. But I'm glad that the gameplay, I feel like, is this stilted version. You can see it. It's like the I always bring this up, but the evolutionary like man walking into, or monkey walking into man kind of thing, and it's like different pieces of the puzzle or whatever. And yeah, it's a great image, and I feel like this is one of those between kind of stilted 3D action like you would see in Castlevania 64 and other like early games, and of course in Mario and stuff like that, where they're trying to figure things out. And then like what we have today in 3D action, like the new Devil May Cry games, and Bayonetta 3 is coming out, and Ninja Gaiden's kind of resurging now and all of that. So we have all of that. I feel like this is in the middle. This is a game where I think it's easy relatively to play on normal. It gets harder on difficult, obviously. And it also has like a notoriously difficult challenge mode if you beat the game, which a lot of people can't do. I don't think I could do it either. Brutal. But like where you have to fight in certain ways and do certain things and like not get hit and all sorts, like I'm not gonna, like stuff that games used to come with to add like length and breadth to your $50 purchase. But what's missing in the game is juggling. Juggling enemies is part of a game like this these days. Like you can't have a game like this and not bring it to the air. And that was the one thing that I felt was missing from a design standpoint, but they weren't there yet in the evolution of 3D action. There weren't very many games like that. I mean, you did kind of have like Ninja Gaiden at this time, on the original Xbox, and a few others. Obviously Devil May Cry is kind of getting into this space, which was supposed to be Resident Evil. So that was kind of like a horror themed kind of thing too. But yeah, like that was my one complaint about the core action, was not that there are only 2 types of weapons, which I think is awesome. Not that there's only 4 types of magic, of which I barely ever used any of them except for the lightning bolt.
Yeah.
And like the lightning that comes down from the top that you get in the very beginning. I get into a rhythm when I play games like this. I'm like, I don't want anything else.
You don't even bother with the other things.
Yeah, like I literally just spent all my souls just upgrading my blades and stuff like that. So I feel like that was the one thing that was missing. And by the way, God of War does become more like that later. I mean, God of War 3 is considered a masterpiece by a lot of people on PS3, and that's a game that's much faster. I'm wondering though what you thought about the way the game uses the sticks and the way the camera works in the game, because the camera can be a little frustrating. I feel like this is one of the games, especially I was playing it in 16:9, obviously, and so were you, but if you played it in 4:3, like most people did back in the day on PS2 on a CRT, the space is really tight. This is the Super Metroid problem. The camera's often too close to Kratos, so like you can't even see what you're attacking.
Yes.
So that was a major problem for me. And then I felt like I just couldn't stop wanting to rotate the camera on the sticks, even though the sticks are really used for left movement and right would be rolling. So what did you think about that? This is another evolutionary step in full dual stick control and full camera control. So what did you think about this evolutionary step?
Yeah, man, that was a problem for me early on. I had to really adapt to that. First of all, I love what you said about the juggling thing. Because once I found out there was an attack that knocked the enemy up, I was like, oh, we're going to get some Marvel vs. Capcom 2 now. We're going to get some juggling in here. And, you could knock them up, but you couldn't really do much after that. So
yeah, you got to you feel like you want to bring it to the air. I don't know if that was the way it felt then, though. I can't speak to that.
Yeah. It was weird because I thought, especially of that era, you're right. That was the brand of action. Fighting game.
Like Kratos can double jump too. Like so, there's a lot
it would
there.
Be a perfect fit. There was something missing there in the mechanics, or they couldn't bring it far enough for deadline or whatever it was. But yeah, man, the world, it was interesting for me with the controls, and the camera was a really interesting one for me, and sort of an eye-opening thing for me too with that fixed camera, because, and I could understand it eventually from a game maker's perspective, because the camera really controls the storytelling. You only are allowed to see what they want you to see from that perspective of that particular bit. So sometimes the camera's behind Kratos, sometimes he's far away from the camera, sometimes he's close to the camera, sometimes you could see him from the back, sometimes you're fighting from the front. And it's all locked off in the nature of really sort of eventual reveals, for playing out the story, for playing out the puzzles, for what they want you to see when they want you to see it. But it was frustrating not to be able to take those analog sticks and move the camera around. And you realize that you're only supposed to see it from this perspective, even if it is uncomfortable. And sometimes it is a little bit uncomfortable that they force you to fight in a labyrinth. It's very tight. The confines are very tight to begin with. Now they want you to fight from the back for a little bit. Or Kratos, they would just stop the camera and Kratos would drift off into the desert and get very small. It reminded me almost of Final Fantasy VII in that regard, where, you would see him, he would have to get small on the horizon before it cut to a different perspective and stuff like that. Very controlled. I wasn't used to that. You're used to being able to control the camera, control the vantage point. But then, you realize, you kind of acquiesce and you realize, okay, I have to play the games under these conditions. And you just adapt to it. And then after that, it felt natural. A couple, a little frustrating for the platforming, made it a little more difficult, and some of the other puzzle elements. And then there was the weird thing. This might not be the appropriate time in the conversation, but before I get to bring it up, I thought it was kind of comical, actually, that there was the mechanic in there of balancing on narrow pathways. It's a very dainty thing for like this almost invincible demigod badass character to do. It was a weird choice. Like all of a sudden he's fighting like gorgons and giant minotaurs with giant axes that are bigger than him, and then he's like pussyfooting along some mast of a ship. I thought it was just a weird choice. I understand it for the play mechanics and it slows down the pace of the game, and again, like kind of the game devs controlling the rhythm, controlling the pace, controlling the storytelling and everything like that. But I thought it was a weird choice. Again, gameplay-wise, I can understand it for variety. It kind of works, but maybe they could have done something else in there. But for the most part, again, like everything else with this game, I got used to it, and it didn't really bug me so much. It was just like, all right, this is how this game's going to be. And I kind of give a nod to the game developers of like, that seemed like a proper way to step out the game and just show the player what you want them to see at each time. It's a way of doing it. It's certainly a way of doing it, even if it's not the best, maybe, the most desirable way or comfortable way.
We have a question here about something fundamental to gameplay as well that we haven't brought up yet, which are the QuickTime events.
Oh, yes.
And so Joe T wrote in and said, I think this game was my first experience with QuickTime events. I thought they were really cool and led to some spectacular jaw-dropping moments. He says jaw-dropping. I don't know. Maybe you meant that.
Could be jaw-dropping.
Could be jaw-dropping. Why not? So QTEs, QuickTime events, are kind of a bad reputation these days. I understand it for the most part. I actually don't mind them. I'm a huge David Cage fan. All of those games at Quantic Dream are built around QTE, so I really don't mind it. But it is strange in an action game, and obviously this does come from games like Dagan loves, like Dragon's Lair back in the day. But Shenmue was really, I think, the game that introduced it on console to everyone on Dreamcast. And then I actually think God of War was the one that was really made QTE a mainstream thing for 10 years or so after that. What did you think about the idea of button presses, like having an action game where it just stops and you do like a small mini game?
Yeah.
It's interesting, and it became kind of a gag after a while. Like people started rolling their eyes because it did become some sort of cop out, I think, for some designers, but I think God of War doing it is quaint because that was like a solution for them. Shenmue's not an action game, so God of War introducing QTE is actually a really valuable, again, piece of game genetics that we find ourselves surrounded by. What did you think about seeing a circle pop up above a Gorgon's head and having to do like a certain game or anything? Did you like that, or did you find that unnecessary?
Yeah, I was a little worried about it going in because, as you said, QuickTime events get generally a bad rep, it seems like. And I have very little experience. I don't have very much experience with it comparatively. But you know what? I liked it. Ultimately, I liked it. At first, I was a little off-put by it. But first of all, you have 3 different types. You have the button mashing type. You have the analog stick rotation type, which I found kind of difficult. And then you have the button sequence, where that was very exacting rhythm. We had to input the button sequences. I thought it didn't really feel like an interruption to me. It just felt like something you could do. As you get deeper into the game, you see those prompts occur as you're fighting certain enemies or as you weaken certain foes, but you don't have to do it. You know what I mean? A lot of times I just chose not to do it. I would just fight through, even though it would, arguably end the fight quicker if you did engage in the QuickTime events. Sometimes you just play through it. And you do it only when you feel like it or there was a particularly satisfying one. I always love the one with the Minotaur, where Kratos sort of shoves the knife down through the, it's a button mashing one, shoves his blade through the Minotaur's mouth. I thought that was really fun. The Medusa one was interesting, where you rip the Gorgon's head off, but that was a hard one because that was the analog stick rotation one. And I just felt like that was, I was already so stressed out fighting these things because they were one of the hardest things to fight, because once they turn you to stone, then they just obliterate you. I always hated when those things popped up. So I was always super stressed anyway. But that was another one. And then the centaurs, that one was cool, where you kind of slice their front legs off before finishing them off. I thought that was particularly brutal. Again, if you're going to get the full, that's the other thing with the QuickTime events in this game. If you're going to get a taste of the full brutality of what they had in mind creating this game, or how how mean-spirited Kratos is supposed to be, and this irredeemable son of a bitch, you have to almost do the QuickTime events to get a full dose of like his, how awful he is.
No, it does. See, there is more to it. I'm realizing, even the more I talk through it now, there is more to the balance than you come to realize. I don't even know if a lot of it's intended, but it very well might be, because everything in it is so deliberate. But I do like what you said about you don't have to do the QTEs. What I like about doing them are like the games, it's not just the satisfaction of doing it, but the game will typically give you like a small bonus, like whether it's like just a few more souls, or like, I think if you do the QTE on the Medusas, they always give you magic and stuff like that. Yeah. So like there's like a risk reward. What I was finding though, I was a little frustrated with the QTE, because QTEs these days, or since then, give you a little bit, like just a fraction of more time. And I felt like I was like, wow, these are pretty hardcore QTE, because I know where all the buttons are, but like you have to really be ready to go. But per that, I think games like this are always valuable to people learning a controller too, if you're not so familiar with the PlayStation controller. The reason I know the PlayStation controller is from Parappa the Rapper in 1998. I mean, that game taught me the controller. It taught me, I remember playing and be like, I'm never going to know what triangle and X and square and circle. And it's like, that's just the way the controller's set up now. Like everyone, or at least if you play PlayStation, everyone knows that setup. Yeah. God of War or any QTE related game, it would have been the same on Dreamcast for Shenmue. It's a valuable way to kind of learn your way around the controller.
Yeah. Definitely,
which is cool.
And you know what? A lot of it is, as the game, a lot of the combat is dealing with constantly respawning enemies. So a lot of times it behooves you to use the QuickTime events to end the fight faster, so you can get to the next batch, because the combat can get pretty hairy, especially if the enemies are tough, like the centaurs, those Cerberus dogs that grow up from the little puppy Cerberus dogs. I mean, those are, some of the enemies you have to deal with quickly, or you're gonna get smashed, especially in I would say the second half of the game to the last quarter of the game. It gets pretty tough. On normal, again, I played on normal too, just to reiterate.
Yeah, I played on normal as well. Another key part of the game is, and you had brought it up before, is puzzle solving. Sumo Joe 118 wrote into us and said, hello, boys. Hello. I would say that alongside being an action game, God of War is also a very challenging puzzle game. Did you enjoy the puzzles, or did you find them to become frustrating? Personally, I found they got kind of annoying, as Pandora's Temple is essentially a gauntlet of never-ending puzzles, some of which made me want to break the controller over my head. I think later on in the series, they found a much better balance between puzzles and combat. Well, this is where I see the Capcom influence. I don't know. I haven't read too much about the making of God of War. I should ask David when he's on my show later, but I just can't help but feel like they were massive influences on this. I don't know how you can look at this and not feel like not from a combat standpoint, but just from a layout and even game length and kind of not semi non-linearity. It feels like a Resident Evil game in a lot of those different ways. Now, I have to admit, I always do this when I play games that I'm not really interested in dicking around with. I just use a walkthrough when I play games like this. Okay. So when I go back and play God of War, it's like I'm not doing, because I'm really dumb. Like, puzzles frustrate me, and they often they'll like kick me out of a game where I'm like, I'm not doing this.
I'm surprised to hear that. Really?
Like, I don't want to play a game to feel dumb. I want to play. This is why I said that a lot when The Witness came out, the Jonathan Blow game on PS4. Like, people really loved that game, and I'm like, that game is hard as fuck. Like, I don't want to play that game. Like, what is this, War Games? I don't want to. This is like not.
That doesn't sound fun to you.
I want to like grind out levels and feel powerful and do that. I mean, that's why I play video games.
Yes.
So yeah. So I'm wondering what you thought, because I'm sure I know how you play. You play more organically than I do. How did you feel about the nature of the puzzles? I actually was, in remembering playing the game previously, and I think the first time I played God of War all the way through, I didn't use a walkthrough actually. I was remembering like, oh, this isn't that difficult until that Pandora's Temple part, and then I needed to kind of consult the walkthrough more carefully.
I could see that. I could totally see having to do it. It's funny. What do you think? Going back to this era of game, I'm very, as you guys know, I'm very critical of myself anyway for missing it. So I'm like, you know what? It took you 15 years to get to this game. You're playing it. You're not using a guide. Colin knows, I never really was into game guides and stuff like that. I feel like part of the game, part of the reason to play for me is to figure it out, and the puzzle thing I get a little worried about, because sometimes that's not always enjoyable to me. But I felt like this game really walked the line successfully of letting you figure it out yourself with a little bit of hand-holding thrown in, a little bit of exposition, a little bit of tip-off. So for me, it was a nice balance. Not that every puzzle I solved right away. Some of it took me a second. And then you have some of those kick yourself moments where you're like, why didn't I see that? Or why didn't I figure that out? Really the only part of the game wasn't even necessarily a puzzle element for me. If you guys remember, it was during the whole Hades bit, there's that sort of corridor you have to run along with the giant lava orbs coming at you in 3 rows. And you have to figure out, there's 4 doors on each side of this long hallway, and you have to figure out which one opens to be able to traverse to the next part. And that was more of a thing of finding the door and button mashing the top shoulder buttons, which I find very difficult. It's not like mashing one of the face buttons. The shoulder, mashing the R button is a pain in the ass. You know what I mean? So I had a lot of difficulty with that level, where it actually asked me if I wanted to revert to easy, and I did for that part. Because I was like, yeah, screw it. And I think what easy basically translated to for that section was that getting hit by those giant orbs just took a little less energy away. But that was enough to get me through it. But for the puzzles, for the most part, I had fun with it. I think it was a nice way to stagger the action and the combat with exploration and also the puzzles. I thought I think they developed a nice rhythm with that. Sometimes, especially in Pandora's Temple, I thought the puzzles were a little too back-to-back. It was like, all right, I just figured out a fucking puzzle. Can I fight for a couple of minutes? Yeah. You know what I mean? That type of feeling. But for the most part, for 90% of it, I felt like it was pretty fun and balanced.
Well, I'm glad you brought it up earlier too, with Kratos like shimmying along the beams and stuff. It is overt if you know anything about game design. I think you can really see, I think, in this game more than usual how they're trying to slow you down.
Yes,
because if you zoom out, I mean, it doesn't exist as one full map, but if you're able to see like the full polygonal map of all of the spaces in God of War, you'd be like, holy shit, I can run through this in 10 minutes. I mean, there has to be a way to slow you down, and all games do it. I've designed and written games that do it too, but it's not Yeah, I think they could be a little more subtle in this game because it already is a short game. I mean, there is a trophy on the PS3 and Vita version to beat it in under 5 hours, and that shouldn't be a problem at all.
Wow,
I mean,
that's
if you know what you're
when
doing.
You told me how short it was, before I played, I was shocked. I was like, wow, that doesn't seem right for a game like this. But then when I started, I think I thought this game was something a little different. I thought there was a little more open-ended exploration and open-worldy, for some reason, thing to it. But I have to say, man,
not yet.
From hearing about the franchise, how it evolved into the next games, I know this game is third in the timeline, but of course there's games that come after it. I'm really excited to play them now. I enjoyed this game enough where I'm like prompted to get to the other iterations for sure.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, because there's God of War 2 and on PS2, God of War 3 on PS3, and then the 2 PSP games, and then Ascension.
There's a lot.
And so those are all the old games, and then the whole new structure of the Norse God of War.
That's right. It's a whole new
with
thing
2018.
now with the sun character and everything.
Yeah, Atreyu, whatever his name is, Atreus.
And they're working on one for the PS5, right?
Yeah, it's called Ragnarok. We don't know anything else about it. It won't come out this year, but we're really excited about that, of course, as well. I really like 2018 God of War, but they're very different games, and that game has some problems too. I don't think I actually love that one as much as a lot of people do either. We can talk about that another time. So I'm interested, Dig, in your impressions. We had brought it up earlier a little bit, but just to delve deeper, what did you make of the inventory system and kind of managing everything in the game? I felt like you said, it's very easy to understand. The Phoenix Feathers, the Gorgon Eyes will upgrade your health and your mana. You earn red orbs or whatever, their souls or some sort of currency that you spend on upgrades. And you have just a very limited amount of things. I mean, you get well through half of the game before even getting the Blade of Artemis. So you're really limited in this game. In addition to its length, which I actually like at what I would consider a pretty decent 8-hour game for an average player, maybe 10 hours. I feel like everything about that is perfect for me. I don't always want a game that's quick. I don't always want a game that's base, but sometimes I do. And I feel like this game does those things very well. Just a little bit of upgrade and a little bit of agency over the character, but not very much. Just a little bit of nonlinearity, but not very much. And, and so on and so forth. And then just a little bit of gameplay, but not too much. I mean, this thing's over. I mean, if you like you said, 12 hours you played or so, I mean, that's like really stretching it.
Yeah.
This game is short. So what do you make of kind of the RPG-like mechanics and the way they translate to what I feel like is a very clean HUD and just a very easy to understand system? I mean, because you're right, the game has that when you say God of War and press X or whatever, it feels very heavy.
Yes.
From the very beginning, like you're going to, it feels like Castlevania a little bit, and like going into the menus and stuff, and it doesn't feel very satisfying, but then you realize that underneath the hood is like a pretty elegant system.
Elegant's very well. Everything you just said is very well said. Castlevania feels heavy at first, elegant, definitely. And I agree with you. I'm learning enough about these style of games where sometimes you do want something a little lean and mean. You just want to be able to get through something relatively quick, a 10-hour game or less. Kind of fun. There's something less stressful about a really advanced or really complicated RPG-ish system. I think back to something I played recently that I really loved. One of my favorite things that we've played on the show was Horizon Zero Dawn, and how complex that gets, and how it almost becomes a little stressful, like real world like stressful, as you guys know. You guys and girls are all gamers out there, where it's like it almost takes on a real life responsibility to like deal with your armor and deal with your money and deal with what weapons you're using and deal with what magic you're using and all that kind of stuff. I like the lean and mean nature of this. You have a couple of weapons eventually to choose from. You just upgrade those two, pick which one you like better. There's a nice trade-off, I think, between the Blades of Chaos, which give you range, and you could spam them. There's something very satisfying about using them. Combos, certainly. And then when you get the Blade of Artemis later on, you're kind of sacrificing that range for a little more strength. So you can kind of choose which one you like better, or which, kind of learn which weapon works better against which foe, which type of enemy. And, then again, you just eventually, you get the Army of Hades magic very late in the game. So most of the game, 3/4 of the game to, I would say 7/8 of the game, you're using 3 magic spells. all very different. I agree with you. Poseidon's Rage was really kind of a cool one that I tended to upgrade, because then you could kind of spam the circle button later on and the range got a little better. But I like that the fact that there's something very thoughtful about giving you 4 magical spells that are all very different. You know, Poseidon's Rage give you this radius attack that has a limited range, but it's pretty powerful. And then the Medusa's gaze, if you want to just use, you know, to turn an enemy to stone just to help you, just sort of put an enemy off to the side while you deal with another enemy, or help you destroy them a little easier. Then you have Zeus's lightning balls, which are your only range attack in the whole game, which you have to use in a couple against the archers in a couple of different places, especially on those balancing beams. And then late in the game, you have the Army of Hades, which is like that one chaos attack that just finds the enemy. Very, very satisfying magical spell to get late in the game, where it's like you don't even have to control it. You know, these ghosts just basically seek out your enemy and destroy them for you, which is really neat. But I liked it. And again, dealing with the 3 different colored orbs, it felt like the game almost felt like it was coddling me a little bit. Like, all right, it's been 15 years, but it's okay. Like, you're gonna get, even a newbie gamer like you're gonna get it just fine. You know, you're able to manage your life, your magic meter, you manage your money. I don't know why they didn't just call the orbs souls. They seem like souls to me.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Right?
They remind me a lot of Animusha. I mean, that heavy Animusha vibes with just sucking in the souls, you know.
Right, exactly.
Huge Animusha vibes there. So I just call them souls.
Very, you know, and you know, you could just open a chest and run away, and they'll still go into your inventory system. You don't have to stay there. Again, the speed, you know, and the efficiency and the satisfying nature of everything in the game.
Yeah, efficiency.
Like you said, they slow you down. Sometimes doors are closed. You have to destroy all the enemies in a stage before those doors will open. Again, slowing you down, the balance beam slowing you down. But really, I felt like a really tidy rhythm in the game. I felt like for the most part, again, except for those few moments where it seemed like the back-to-back puzzles was a little bit frustrating. It was like, all right, I'd like to also fight. You know, I'm this badass warrior. I don't want to just be moving columns around and forming Rubik's Cube type puzzles or whatever. But for the most part, yeah, man, I just think like you said, the heads up was really clean. There was a great clarity, even to a gamer who hasn't been doing these games that, you know, I missed a lot of games. So I'm catching up. A gamer that's catching up. That's fair to say, I think. And yeah, for me, it worked. I thought it was really clean, really tidy. You could see those areas that they skimped on. Like you said, like where the combat could have been a little more immersive. They could have taken to the next level with juggling or doing something, but you know, there's not that many boss fights. That's another thing. Those boss fight moments are epic, it leaves you wanting more. The Hydra battle, the giant Minotaur. There's some epic boss fights, but again, you know, there's certain things that I guess they couldn't do everything. But for the most part, nice little package, man. I was really happy to go in and experience this one.
Yeah, it's a good first foray into the series, and as I think maybe I just noticed this as a design nerd in some way, but I noticed that the enemy AI in the game is really smart. It's really well done. And I was actually messing with it a little bit. Like you can start manipulating some of these things, but I was just playing around with some of the lesser enemies, like jumping away from them and like jumping over gaps, and like they'd follow you and jump you over gaps. I mean, obviously this isn't like that crazy, because I'm sure it's really just like a heat seeking sort of thing. And they just have programmed into them, like you reach gap, jump over gap. I mean, it's not that complicated, but there's a lot of thought that went into like the enemies are aggressive. That there's no way to really get away from them. You have to confront them and fight them. It's not like some action games are very divide and conquer-y, where especially shooters, where you're like taking cover and you're trying to just like get rid of the closest dude or the dude with the biggest. Like if you're playing The Last of Us and one of the dudes has like a shotgun, it's like, I gotta get rid of that guy like really quick. In this, it's just like whatever enemy is the closest, like you're just swinging your blades and just doing damage to anything, because it's just so kinetic and so quick and so dangerous. So one of the things I wanted to ask, it's a huge part of this is, I was wondering what you thought of the presentation itself. We haven't talked about the mythology, which we will, but as an artist, what did you think about the art direction in the game? And I feel like PS2 is so interesting because you can start seeing, I think more than anywhere else, the sacrifices that need to be made, quite literally, to get a game to in some way look the way it does. But you have to you can't run all of these models at the same time. You have to get rid of like certain textures, or you have to fit everything into a memory kind of ceiling.
Right.
And I think it shows in God of War, because I think it exposes a lot of the PS2. PS2 was never a very powerful machine. And so I'm wondering if you feel like, I put this in my notes because I didn't know how else to say it. It comes off as a little goofy because it's very serious and sometimes it looks really good. And I wrote down some specific places that I want to talk about that I'm like, wow, this looks awesome. But then when it happens in real time, when they don't go to a full motion video, but something that's happening within the engine, within the confines of the world, it's very startling because it looks like shit. You know, like there's a scene when like you meet the gravedigger and he's digging the dirt, but like his shovel's not even going in the dirt and it's just like a puff of smoke or whatever. And it's like, why wouldn't you use this as a moment to have some full motion video, like have some sort of pre-rendered thing going on? So I just felt like telling the story like that, I think they had to probably fit it in with the memory confines of fitting it on one PS2 disc as well. But I wish that they spent more time telling the story within those really beautiful pre-rendered sequences as opposed to splitting the difference, because sometimes it looks really dumb and it looks goofy. It makes it hard for me to take this seriously, because it almost would be easier to take it seriously if you didn't have the beautiful parts and instead just had it all in engine, because then I would not be taken out and then put back in.
Yes.
So what did you think about all of that?
Yeah, that must be a really tricky thing to juggle. You could speak more to that being a game dev yourself, but that must always be tough to figure out what goes where, you know, full motion cutscenes versus something that has to look a little more rudimentary and playable. Certainly. I remember the first thing that took me out of the game. Of course, you're talking about a game that's 17 years old or whatever, so it's going to date itself a little bit. The first thing that took me out of the game a little bit, where I thought looked really goofy, was the way they mapped, I guess, Ares' face. When you first see Ares and he's devastating, you know, he's this giant kaiju-like god and he's devastating Athens and they're attacking him with arrows and everything like that, and he's just rampaging. They have some kind of weird mapping on his face. Instead of just modeling and animating his face, there was some kind of weird mapping on it that stood out. It's like, here's this human face on top of this CG model, you know, this sort of low poly CG model. It was goofy. And you make a great point, Kyle. Why it does stand out, I think, so much in this game, those little graphical foibles or whatever, is that this game really does take itself very seriously. There's a great gravity. You know, it's very serious. It's very stoic. There's a lot of testosterone. It's a very testosterone-y game.
Which I think is different than Doom, where I think Doom is the same but doesn't take itself seriously.
Yes, that's a great point. I love talking about it in this conversation because it just seems like a natural fit. But yeah, there's something about Doom where it's like, it's unapologetic, but yeah, there's something in that's, I don't know if tongue-in-cheek is the right word or cartoony, but there's something there that is forgiving. Where in this game, it just makes it stand out. It's almost like, if you're such a badass, why does this look so terrible or whatever? Not to be overly critical, but it certainly doesn't detract really ultimately from the game. It's playing the game, but just from a graphical vision, you know, visual standpoint, I think there are things to be said for that. And yeah, some of the environments too, I felt like didn't necessarily hold up. There's a nice sort of evolution with the enemies where if you get like those, very Ray Harryhausen-esque skeleton warrior, legionnaire type soldiers that, you know, eventually in the game they evolve, they become armored, they pack different weapons, maybe later on in the underworld at the River Styx, they become like undead warriors. So there's a really nice graphical evolution where they're rehashing enemies, but they're adding to them, which was very clever. There's also something very clever in this game that's not unheard of, but something I definitely noticed in this game was that you revisit environments and areas and places in the game in a cyclical nature. So, which is very clever from a development standpoint, because you're coming back around to the same places now with a new door opened, or now with a new area accessible that wasn't previously accessible or traversable.
Right, which is very Metroidvania, you know.
Very very Metroidvania. And you know what's funny about the game? It is Metroidvania, but you don't necessarily know they're bringing you roundabout until you get to that part. And you're like, oh shit, I'm back here again, which was kind of cool. Absolutely. I haven't personally experienced that much in a game. Usually they would just take you to a new, you know, whisk you off to a new place level by level, or it would be very apparent that you have to revisit a place. You know, you would see a lot. I guess you do in this game. You could see locked doors, and you're like, oh, I guess eventually I have to come back to this area, or whatever. But they
it's like
in a pretty.
It's Arkham Asylum,
way.
like almost Arkham Asylum-esque, where in a 3D space, you know, it's a little more deliberate in Arkham for sure, but I just see it in a 3D space kind of like that, where you're like, oh, you're back here again. You're back in the Pandora Tower. Or
that's
whatever.
That's a great comparison. Yeah, that's a really good one too. Yeah, you know what? Graphically though, it didn't bother me. Maybe I'm just getting more forgiving in my old age, where you chalk it up to like, this is so long ago. You know, I mean, look at the evolution graphically from year to year now. It's like insane. So, you know, you think back this time, I would love to know, this is my only regret with games like this. I would have loved to examine this game now, really having enjoyed it, in a historical, like in a context of and unto its own era. Like, I would have loved to play this game in 2005 with the other contemporary games that came out at the same time, to compare and contrast, because now it's much harder to do that, you know. Indeed.
It's a good one to add to your quiver. I think I'm happy about that. And I must say, by the way, just to give credit where credit is due, even playing it on Vita, the game runs really well. It's very stable, frame rate's really stable, and the action is quite fluid. So from that perspective, a lot of nice animations and all of that. I think the model work is pretty cool. I think the enemies are really interesting as well. And you had brought it up a little bit earlier, but just, I love the way the game plays with scope within using the models, the same models that you see up close and far away, in order to do these really cool moves with the camera, zooming way out, zooming way in. There's a part where you're going down a staircase and the camera's just rotating with you, and you can tell because you stop and the camera stops moving. So you can tell that they've tethered one to the other, but it creates this really cool spinning sequence as the camera kind of goes up and over top. Much like Metal Gear Solid, this is a game that started playing around with cinematics, like really started playing with in-game cinematics about like where a camera will be, not giving you a static point of view of a room like Devil May Cry, which there's nothing wrong with that, but rather as Kratos moves through the room, the camera swings to show you something, and the camera will swing back out as you move away from it. It's frustrating because you want to kind of move around and see secrets in the room and in the rooms, and see things that you're probably not supposed to see, things that are like untextured and all of that. But
that's a great point.
But so they're able to hide things in environments by never allowing you to see them, which is cool. So like if you see the front of a building, you might never see the building in an angle where you don't notice that there's nothing on one side of it, you know, and they can get that out of the RAM requirement of the game. So it's cool that they still play with the way the camera moves, and it feels really cinematic. I do like it. There's another sequence where he's running into like one of these early parts of the game, and the camera just pans out and then zooms back in as he runs into this thing. And it's very cool. It's a little bit of a dick swinging moment for the game devs, I think, and saying like, this really is running right now in real time. And it is impressive. The playing with scale like that, not the first, you know, it's the same year that Shadow of the Colossus came out. So
right. People
are playing with scale in different ways here, but playing with scale in such a way, I think is really cool. And I wanted to give a shout out, by the way, just to, I was especially flummoxed. I couldn't believe that this was running on PS2. In Athens Town Square, when you go into the temples and there's all of this wall art, you can smash through some of it.
Yeah.
But the finely sheened floor is reflective, creating a mirror image of you and everything that's going on top of the floor. And it's incredible. I mean, that is so demanding on what that game can do, that was certainly must have been a showpiece for them to show the game off. I wasn't at IGN during the preview cycle, but I would imagine that was part of it. And I just couldn't believe that they got it running. I mean, mirror reflections in video games are so demanding that they never appear until recently. Like, even if you play like big games,
yeah,
they won't do it. So like, there are certain things that just don't happen in games very often. Like, you might notice that blankets and sheets never go over a character because it looks horrible. So they always lay on top of them.
Right.
And certain things like that. And this is another one of those things that you never see for a reason, because it's the same reason why it's basically rendering things twice. It's twice as demanding. It's the same thing like why VR requires half the resolution to get twice the frame rate so it looks right. You know, you can't have it all. Was there any part of the game that stuck out to you? I was curious what you thought, if you know what I'm talking about with those temples.
Yeah,
they're
beautiful.
Absolutely stunning.
Gorgeous.
I mean, they look like they look almost like PS3 or maybe even better quality.
Yeah,
it's pretty incredible.
It's a great point. Some of this game really does feel PS3 worthy for sure. Like some of it really does look beautiful. I love that part. There's Hades part of the underworld where you have that red pool and the giant Hades statue, and it's sort of everything is, you have the giant staircase and the lava flows underground. I thought that was really pretty. I thought there was a lot of, where they're handling like liquid effects, and some of the weather effects are really cool. I think, a lot of it really holds up. Some of it, we talk about the title screen, it feels like very iconic of that era. It's like, oh, Jesus, type of thing, where it seems like almost like canned fire effects and stuff.
Right.
But other parts of the game are like really, really nice. You have this, I know they wanted to do more with like sandstorm elements, but even in the desert, you have, the blowing wind, and it's sort of, it feels very, there's a really almost like a ethereal sort of effect to the environment there, which is really cool. Yeah, some of it was really, it wasn't offensive at all. It was really, almost like felt like, proper PS3 even without playing an HD version or anything like that. And the other thing about running speed, Kyle, I played it on PS Now and had very few problems. Maybe a brief second-long hiccup here and there, but still for the most part, I was playing late at night, but that shouldn't even make a difference. I thought it ran really smooth. Really smooth.
Nice, that's great to hear.
Without, loading times, PS, which is a big deal.
Definitely. And that's a good endorsement of PlayStation Now. I haven't messed around with it too much yet myself, so the audience wants me to do that. I think Chris plays it more for our show. But Dig, one thing it hadn't come up yet, and we should talk about it, obviously, is the mythology is at the root of the game. Now, I have to say, and I didn't want to interrupt you earlier and kind of get us on a tangent, but I must say, like, I don't have very much love for Greek and Roman mythology. Like, I don't. I think it's cool. I don't find it bothersome.
Yeah.
I think it's neat, but it's certainly like it would never be ever like a location or a theme that I would explore and like something I would really want to see or do.
That's very interesting.
Like if you were like, there's a great new TV show, but it takes place in like Roman mythology, I'll be like, I mean, that's maybe that's not, I like newer things. The reason separating the two, I mean, mythology from history, these are two different things, but even the historical aspect of the Roman Empire and Greece and Sparta and all these things, like it's very tenuous. We don't know very much. You have certain primary sources and certain assumptions are made, but there's a lot of lost information and lost history. And so that frustrates me. So I don't like asking questions that literally will never be answered. Like it's more likely that we find out if there's like aliens amongst us than it's likely we'll find out like some of the questions about what was going on with Rome and Greece, that like, where the Library of Alexandria was burned down. And so we lost all of this knowledge and all of that, So that's one thing. So it's too old for my history taste. It's just too old. The other part is that I don't know. I was never attracted to mythology. I don't even know very much about it. Even like the relationships between everyone and all of that. It's cool because it's like one huge, long, centuries long pagan story. It's like a cinematic universe. It's like the first cinematic universe, Roman mythology.
That's a great
Greek
point.
Mythology.
That's a really great point.
But
really is.
But I like where everything, this guy's brother, and he was in this thing and this parable, and he was in this epic, and his son is founded this thing, and it's interesting, but like it's too much for me. So God of War has no draw to me because of that. It plays no role in it at all. And that was what was so cool about God of War Remake was it's Norse. So it's much newer in quotes. And I can get my mind around that a little bit more, even though it's very similar where I'm like, I don't care about gods and shit.
Yeah, I could see that.
So that's my take on it. It's very inoffensive, but that is my take. Well, how do you feel about mythology and the way this game worked with it?
I like hearing that they're bold enough to sweep this franchise into other places and take it outside of Greek mythology. That's pretty cool. That's going to be something worth exploring. Greek mythology is an interesting one for me. I was thinking about this. It's probably one of the only worlds that got introduced to me, with the exception of dinosaurs, like the Jurassic period and the era of dinosaurs, that school turned me on to, where it was like, that is what kindled the original interest specifically in Greek mythology. I was trying to decide if it was second, third, or fourth grade. But when we learned about this in school, which is the first time I ever heard of Greek mythology, you know, the gods and the titans and the heroes and the monsters and the stories and the legends and all that kind of stuff, I really went on a deep dive. Like, I was really into it. I would get books out from the library. There was another fortunate dovetailing with Clash of the Titans, the 1981 movie Clash of the Titans, where I went on a relatively brief but very meaningful love affair with that movie because they showed it on Showtime, I believe, in the early 80s over and over again. I would watch it, and, you know, you could get into the Gorgon, you know, Medusa and the Cyclops and, you know, the hero that and the peg that flies around on his Pegasus and all that kind of stuff. It was just like I was all in for it, which is interesting to think about somebody who was so into Star Wars and sci-fi. I guess it almost felt a little bit like that, and just that it was another sort of unbelievable, fantastic tale of good versus evil. So I was down, you know, and especially for the creatures, you know, learning about the Minotaur who kept prisoners in his inescapable maze, and the Cyclops and Zeus and all the, you know, the gods, and how they would exact vengeance on man if you pissed them off. Like, it seemed, I guess it was kind of scary. It was almost like dinosaurs, you know, it was like the same kind of type of thing. It was like, wow, this is kind of frightening, you know, and it's so funny. As a kid, I never really questioned the origins of it. Like, even as a little guy or girl, you know, like, dinosaurs lived here once on Earth before man was here, before humans were here. And it's almost an unbelievable thing. With Greek mythology, I think I just took it as stories, you know, that, oh, these are really neat fairy tales, or, you know, nursery rhymes, or stories, Star Wars-esque tales about, you know, good guys versus bad guys and monsters and stuff. So Greek mythology for me, I know a lot of Gen Xers probably came up the same way because we learned about it in school, you know, the Greek myths. And I think a lot of it, you know, for me, it's just, I mean, this is a gimme for a video game. Now, we saw it in the 8-bit generation in smaller doses with things like Kid Icarus or Battle of Olympus or something. But it's amazing that Greek mythology wasn't more paramount in a lot of video game. Not that there wasn't Greek myth games before this, but there weren't. You would think it would be like one of the most explored areas for a video game. I mean, it's just such fertile territory to make a video game out of. So I'm already in. You know, you got the Minotaur, and you got the Satyrs and the Gorgons and the Cyclops and the Harpies and the undead skeleton warriors, which, you know, is very Jason and the Argonauts-esque. You know, you could see Jason and the Argonauts in 63, 64, and Clash of the Titans in the early 80s. Like, those were the two epic Hollywood movies that you could just pull so much of the shit from. And they did, you know, which is wonderful. I could see the influences, you know, right from the outset. But I loved Greek mythology, man. I was all about it in the late 70s, early 80s. So for me, I could only imagine, like, it's almost unfortunate that this game is so hyper violent and hyper sexualized, because it could be really kind of cool for a younger generation. Now, you could probably just take Greek mythology and make a more age appropriate game for those people. There's nothing wrong with what they did here. But yeah, I started playing. I was telling Colin, I started playing it with my son. He's 10, and thank God he was slow on the up, you know, on sort of the upkeep and sort of like getting into it, where he was probably 10 minutes before the first boobies in the game. And then I was just like, you know what? The next morning when I got a little further into it, I started my own game and got a lot further. And I was like, dude, it's, you know, it's not. Yeah, it's not, you're not going to find it that interesting type of thing. Just kind of like talked him off of it. And he was like, fine. And he just went back to his Minecraft or whatever. But thank God. I mean, that was really hypersensitive time-wise. I mean, we could have gotten into some birds and bees conversation as a result of that. So we avoided that one for now.
Yeah, good. Which is, I'm sure all parents want to avoid at all costs. It's funny because Kenneth Copnick wrote into us on Patreon. He says, what we need is more quick sex time events in games. I'm sure Colin is familiar with it in the game, but 17-year-old Kenny thought it was edgy. Did Dagan know about it, and what did he think? How does it hit Colin all these years later? So did you do the sex mini game where
I didn't do it? I saw it.
Sleep with okay, so
I missed it somehow.
Yeah, it's like a thing you can miss or whatever. It is weird. When I was playing it, I'm like, wow, this is pretty heavy shit for PlayStation 2 era video games. Like, this is bordering on not getting a rating, I think. And it's pretty, I would love to know what the interaction was between Sony and the ESRB over this game, because it must have not been as cut and dry as that. I mean, there are games that are M-rated that really push the boundaries as well, like Grand Theft Auto, obviously, but I think the use of breasts and kind of, I don't want to say violence against women and children and stuff like that, because I don't think it's quite in that context, but it's there and all of that. So it is a little heavy in some different ways, just chicks with their boobs out on a pretty constant basis. Do you think it adds anything to the game? It might be realistic and true to form, probably is in some way to a more Greek sensibility, but and a Greek mythological sensibility. But I just continue to think that sex adds very little to story. Sex is very important to life, but it doesn't need to. You can just. It's like I said, like a pan up and away. Like we don't need it. I feel prudish when I say that, but I just feel like the boobs and the sex mini game and that kind of stuff is added just to get middle school and high school kids like talking to each other. I feel like it's very shock value stuff. And I feel like in some way, Jaffe's too clever for that, you know?
Yeah.
Like it didn't seem to have any purpose. So what do you make of all that?
That's a great point, man. I mean, the pan up philosophy that you just said really speaks to me. It does seem gratuitous. The other thing about this game, now I understand you're going all in on like the ancient conqueror, merciless, insatiable warrior type thing. I get it. We talked about this with Game of Thrones too, but if you're talking about this specific story with Kratos and how he's exacting revenge for the death of his wife and daughter, putting the sex element in there makes it a little weird. I understand the unmitigated rage and the anger and the fighting and the violence, but the sex thing actually flies in the face of what you're saying here, that he's thinking about, his wife and daughter and the tragedy inherent in this whole situation with exacting revenge on this god who betrayed him and tricked him and all that kind of stuff. The sex thing is actually kind of weird, makes it kind of weird. It's like, it does seem, I have to say, it does seem gratuitous. I don't see it in any other way. It just seems like, it doesn't seem to be appropriate for what the story you're trying to tell.
Well, it would have been cooler if Kratos was confronted with these things, but just wasn't interested in them.
There you go. That's smart.
Kind of like how you envision Boba Fett, like where like he wouldn't be tempted,
right?
In his situation or whatever. That would have been cool to like throw these women at Kratos, and they might play with that in later games. I mean, because there's a lot of that. I mean, you see that with the sirens in a way in the game, which I loved the designs. I do like the idea of the siren, like these beautiful demonic
cool.
women. Yeah, like I love that. I love that whole idea of like being seduced by, and I that was like a whole tale of like, wasn't it like that comes from like sailors encountering them, right?
Yeah,
and like the siren call and all that.
They would trick the sailors. Yeah,
it's awesome. Cool. It's like, that's cool. I mean, I like that. I love the idea of who hasn't been sucked into the wiles of a beautiful woman once or twice.
Yeah, I love what you said, man, about like just like no earthly pleasure could take this guy off the track of getting what he wants to get, which is vengeance. Which is doing his job, which is just being like a killer, basically. I mean, that's really.
Well, I mean, because like, why not show him sitting at a tavern, eating all their food and drinking all their beer? It would be the same sort of hedonistic approach. So like the idea that it's just sex is weird and is done for shock value, which I don't think the game really needs. Because I have no problem with the game's violence. I think it's like he's supposed to be nuts.
Yeah,
like that's cool. I mean, it gets much more realistic later on, like the violence, and that's also cool. I have no problem with that because it plays some sort of purpose. But Dig, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you wanted to touch on?
No, I mean, just with Kratos, like I love what you said, like the way he's just haunted by these nightmares and he's driven, most of the way insane. And that's what you're dealing with here. And I love that the fact that it turns out to be pretty thoughtful. Like, all right, you have this, it's not just this badass warrior, this killer, this gratuitous violence. Like there's a story behind it. Even learning later on, like his appearance, like his chalky white skin is actually the ashes of his wife and daughter that he's forced to wear on the outside to be a constant reminder of like the atrocities he committed, which is it's really kind of cool. That it was surprising. I enjoyed the game playing it, but that was a pleasant surprise. To the further that you get, the more story you got and the more substance you got. It wasn't just this, this typical video game where you have this faceless, nameless hero and he's got to fight this nameless, faceless bad guy and then he's going to save the princess or something like that. There's a lot more to it. And, typical of like Greek, ancient Greek stories, tragedy, right? This tragedy just keeps getting ramped up to the next level where even though like he succeeds in his mission, he spoiler alert, he defeats Ares. He claims Ares' vacant throne and becomes the actual god of war that they can't or they won't. The gods won't strip him of his nightmares. That's the cross he still has to continue to bear, even as the god of war. That there, it doesn't end. It's not just like, okay, you're sort of purged of all your sins, Kratos. You're the man now, or whatever. It's like, no, you're gonna fucking pay for this forever. I love that little nuance, that little touch. It's like these nightmares aren't gonna stop. I mean, I didn't want, we saved you from killing yourself, but you're going to have to live with this for a while. And almost like saving him from suicide as a form of punishment. It's
it is dark. There's a darkness there.
It's pretty serious shit,
Yeah, it is. You're right. And I also want to give it, I'm glad you had fun with it. And I think a lot of that was kind of funneled for me through this prism of a high cinematic quality, something I don't very much commend a lot of games for, a really interesting and I think powerful soundtrack and score, which in games like this, especially when I've played them already, I'm a very multitask oriented person. I like listening to podcasts, or I like just knowing that I'm doing two things at once makes me very happy, and with this game, I just played it. I was just actually kind of mesmerized by it on my Vita at night. I just had my notepad in my lap and my laptop nearby in case I needed the walkthrough. And I was just like playing through it. So it's available on PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, PlayStation Vita, PlayStation Now, so PlayStation 4 as well. And you should go check it out. The original 2005 God of War, trophy enabled on all those platforms except for PS2, of course. And that's it. God of War. I'm glad we did this one. It's another, like you said, another important touchstone for you. And I would say one of only a few PlayStation touchstones we've covered so far. So, and maybe the most substantial early on. So
yeah, definitely. Fun. It's so cool, man. I feel like, my pedigree is getting built up.
Definitely.
Notch by notch.
You're legitimizing yourself before our very eyes here.
Proud.
We appreciate that.
I feel proud.
You should. Thank you all out there for your love, kindness, and support of our show, KnockBack, and of course, all other things Last Stand Media. You can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/laststandmedia. Buy merch, laststandmedia.shop, and leave us nice reviews on iTunes. Leave us a nice comment or thumb us up, or follow us on YouTube, etc., and so on. However you want to enjoy us, please do. We'll see you next time for more KnockBack.
Wait, don't forget my dad joke.
Sorry, something didn't feel right, actually, because I was like, this is not the way I usually wrap up. I usually wrap up Sacred Symbols this way. You're right. Thank you.
You guys aren't doing dad jokes on Sacred Symbols. I can't have that.
No, we wouldn't do that. That's your thing. I'm sorry, Dagan. Please.
Oh, I have this one memorized. Kyle.
Yeah.
What do you call a fish with legs?
I don't know.
A toonie fish.
I'm glad we stopped wrapping it up for that. Yeah, that was a good one.
That was a preschool safe one, I would even say.
Oh, yeah, that was a good one. I like that one. Well, Dagan, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all out there. We love you. Appreciate you. See you next time.
How do I do
this time we're going for real. Goodbye. KnockBack, a retro and nostalgia podcast, is a product and trademark of Last Stand Media and Collins Last Stand LLC, and is recorded from Central Virginia and the Philadelphia suburbs, USA. The show was conceived by and is produced by me, Colin Moriarty. My co-host is Dagan Moriarty. KnockBack's executive producer is Dustin Furman, and the show is edited by associate producer Ben Smith. Stan's theme music is by Ramon Narvaez. As you know, all of Last Stand Media's shows, including KnockBack, are fan-funded on Patreon at patreon.com/laststandmedia. The following names are at the producer support level or higher on Patreon, and we're grateful for your kindness and generosity.